What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It is Mikey McNuggets coming at you on a Thursday afternoon, a little earlier than usual for this week's Cavaliers Weekly, but Cleveland is back home tonight taking on the San Antonio Spurs. It is their first home game in almost 2 weeks, so press availability is early. And I got to get and talk to Kenny Atkinson before tonight's game. It's been, like I said, 10 days since we have a chance to discuss with Kenny back and forth on some of the things we saw on this West Coast road trip. So that's why we're going early today, but we're still going to get you a full show, a full 20 minutes talking all things Cavs here as Cleveland gets ready to wrap up the final 10 games of the regular season. 3 things I want to hit on as we go through this 20-minute stream today. First and foremost, the Cavs getting hot again. They have won 2 in a row now after losing 4 in a row. So are they entering the final 10 games on a bit of a hot streak? And can you control when a team peaks? How do the Cavs finalize their playoff rotation? How should Kenny Atkinson handle these last 10 games in terms of who gets minutes and who doesn't? Plus, rest versus rust down the stretch. How I think Kenny and the Cavs should handle Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley and Derek and who else is on that playoff rotation down the stretch, because it's some interesting decisions they have. They have essentially wrapped up the 1 seed. ESPN gives them a 99.9% chance to clinch the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. So they're not really playing for much anymore other than making sure they are clicking on all cylinders down the stretch. But let's start with the Cavs playing better basketball of late. They beat the Blazers and the Jazz to end that West Coast road trip. The game against Portland, man, that is a schedule loss galore. Not only is it the 5th game in 8 nights away from home, but they played in Utah on Sunday, then flew further west to Portland to then come back east to come home to Cleveland. The NBA did Cleveland no favors with the travel on that West Coast road trip, and that is typically a game that not just the Cavaliers, but other top teams have lost time after time after time again. Think about it. You haven't been home in 8-9 days. You haven't slept in your bed. You've been in hotels. You haven't seen your kids, your wife, your girlfriend, your friends, your family. You've been living on the road out of a suitcase for 8 or 9 days. Now, granted, it's the NBA. Their travel lifestyle is a lot different than ours. But still, there's comfort and luxury in being home and getting to sleep in your own bed and being in a familiar environment as opposed to playing 5 games in 5 different cities in an 8-day span. So when you have to go to Portland to end the trip, a game against a team that is fighting for its play-in life, Portland not eliminated yet, but they needed that win. It was really encouraging to see Cleveland come out and play a good game. Donovan didn't play. Darius had 27 and 8 in the win. Evan had 20-plus points. I think he had 21 and 11. They had 3 different guys scored 20 points. Ty Jerome filled in admirably again with another 20-point performance. And it is all the little things that the Cavs had done prior to that losing streak that we finally saw them get back to on Sunday and on Tuesday. Now, Utah, they threw in the white flag. That is what it is. But Portland was a real win. A good win, and a win that shouldn't be celebrated like it's beating Boston in Game 7, but it's a game that Cleveland easily could have lost. No one would have batted an eye, and they overcame adversity. Now, Portland missed a ton of shots, but that's a team that gave Cleveland trouble during their 16-game win streak earlier this season when Portland came to Rocket Arena about a month ago. The game was on March 2nd. It was the first Sunday in the month of March. So fast forward a month, sure, the Cavs had not been playing at the same level they were earlier, but they put away a team that they needed to come back from 18 down just 3.5 weeks ago to beat in overtime with relative ease. Portland also is a team that pressures you full court. It's one of these new era, new aged, young, running gun athletic teams that likes to get up in you and be physical and make things ugly, muck it up, make you have to work incredibly hard to get quality shots. The Cavs were relatively unfazed by the pressure. They struggled against it in early March. They thrived against it this time, this most recent opportunity. And a lot of the reason for that was Darius Garland, who struggled mightily in that first game against Portland. But on Tuesday night, when push came to shove, with no Donovan Mitchell in the lineup, it was Darius Garland who time after time after time was getting his feet in the paint and forcing Portland to react to his offensive game. And then when they reacted, Darius was countering their actions with the right pass, the right shot, or the right read. He's done it all season for the most part. Yes, he's gone in shooting slumps. And when he's not making his mid-range floater and that little 8-foot jump shot, his overall efficiency drops to levels that could be concerning for the long-term playoff push. But when he's right, you are watching one of the better point guards in basketball navigate and lead one of the best offenses the NBA has ever seen. I would argue that Evan Mobley is the most important player on the Cavaliers. When he's out, and he's out tonight against San Antonio, the Cavs don't have another big man that can replicate his skills, and they can't do what he can do. When Donovan and Darius are out, Ty Jerome has stepped in, and he's done incredibly well in those situations. But when Tristan has to play for Evan, it's a little bit of a drop-off, if you know what I'm saying. No disrespect to Tristan, but he's certainly not Evan Mobley on either end of the court at this point of his career. But with Evan being the most important player on the Cavs, I think there's a legitimate case to be made that Darius has been their overall best player this season. Yes, the slump has negated some of that. And Donovan is the best player on the team. Donovan will most likely be an All-NBA first-teamer this season, and rightfully so. And Darius may not even make any of the All-NBA teams. He may end up being a third-teamer. He may not make it at all. But what I do know about Darius is that he has been incredibly clutch this season. He would get my vote for the clutch player of the year. The numbers back it out, despite the fact that they weren't great in the clutch during that 4-game losing streak. And he's the catalyst of what they do. Donovan has been incredible at times this season, but too often, and this is because Donovan has relinquished some of the control of the offense, Kenny and company have run stuff through DG and Evan and let Donovan be the decoy. And because of that, I think Darius has had a better season compared to what we expected than anyone else on the team. And it was great to see him getting back to his high efficiency form. And if he does that, the Cavs are damn near unguardable. Because then you add Donovan Mitchell, and then you add in Ty Jerome, and DeAndre Hunter, and Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen, and it's a pick-your-poison situation. Who do you take away? The first answer better be Darius Garland, because if you don't, he could be the one that kills you for 25 points without even really noticing. How should the Cavs get ready to finalize their playoff rotations? Well, I think 10 games is too far out to officially start to lock in the 8 or 9 guys you want to play when it comes to a playoff series against Boston. Now, we've said this on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show before. I'm going to say it again. If they play the Bulls in the first round or the Hawks, the Magic maybe, but I still think the Magic fit into this category. In that first round, Kenny's probably going to play 10, 11 guys. And I think he should. You know, if the games aren't close and you're up 3-1 in the series, yeah, you have the ability to stretch your bench a little bit and keep your top guys fresh. But in an Eastern Conference Final scenario against either New York or Boston, I do believe the Cavs are going to shrink their rotation from 10 to 8, and maybe you sprinkle in some 9th minutes for Sam Merrill or Isaac Okoro, depending on certain situations. But I think your solidified top 8 in a playoff series is the core 4, Max Strus, DeAndre Hunter, Dean Wade, and Ty Jerome. And then if Sam Merrill or Okoro or anyone else is hot and they got to play them for a certain situation, then so be it. But the guys getting the majority of the minutes are those guys, those 8 right there. So I think with 10 games left, prioritizing health and making sure the core 4 plus those 4 I mentioned are as healthy as humanly possible for the playoff stretch is more important than anything else. I would say it's more important than the chance of getting rusty as the playoffs begin. And if that means sitting Donovan for a week to rest up his groin, or sitting Evan a week to rest up his calf, or giving Jared Allen a few days off, despite what he says about wanting to play 82 games, giving him a few days to rest up that right hand, or Darius a couple maintenance days, or DeAndre or Ty or whoever, honestly, whoever needs a night or 2 off. I am all for Kenny Atkinson prioritizing as healthy as possible over regular season results. Now, if Boston cuts this number 1 seed lead down to 2 games, then yeah, that goes out the window. But until that happens, and I don't anticipate it happening, despite the fact Boston is playing much better of late, the Cavs have the luxury of resting certain guys. Evan Mobley's resting tonight. They're 7-0 without Mobley this season. I don't need him against the Spurs. They don't need him against the Wemby-less and De'Aaron Fox-less Spurs. That's for darn sure. So as Kenny gets closer and closer to the finish line, and the Cavs get closer and closer to wrapping up the regular season, I do think it makes a lot of sense for Kenny Atkinson and the staff to pick and choose nights off for certain guys until the 5-game mark. And when there are 5 regular season games left, I think that's when you flip the switch. With 5 regular season games left, you need to start clicking. And I do believe you can control to an extent. And that's a key there. Let me re-emphasize that one more time. to an extent, I think you can control when a team starts to peak. There are a ton of variables at play for that. It is not simply snap of a finger, okay, we're ready. It's not that easy. But I do think a team needs 3 or 4 games to fully gel together, play as one, play with all your guys. That's a big part of it. Get all your guys playing, get into the normal rotations. If Kenny wants to leave Donovan and Evan on the court a little longer for their first shift in a playoff series, get them used to that so the first time you're throwing it out there isn't in game 1 against Chicago for whatever example we're using. It could be any of those teams in the play, and we'll just use Chicago for the sake of this stream. I want to see Kenny get those guys into that flow and into that rhythm and get Sam Merrill and Okoro into the mindset of, hey, I may only get 4 minutes here. If I don't make the absolute most of these 4 minutes, I'm not getting back in this game. So I'm going to give 10,074% for those 4 minutes. And Dean Wade, he knows he's got 15, 16 minutes here at the backup 5. How does he best fit in? Another thing I want to see from Kenny, DeAndre Hunter hasn't played a ton of minutes with the core 4. We keep saying, and G. Bush on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show keeps preaching that he wants to see Hunter start. Well, frankly, over the first month and a half, almost 2 months now of DeAndre Hunter being in Cleveland, he's played 53 total minutes with the core 4, plus him. So are you really confident that that's the team's best starting and/or closing lineup? Maybe it is. I'm not saying it can't be. I am fully aware that it very well may end up being the Cavs' best 5-man lineup. I don't know what the answer is to that question yet, and I think that may be a good thing for the Cavs, that their versatility and flexibility allows them to mix and match different lineups to meet their opponent's strengths and then, what's the word I'm looking for? Exploit, their weaknesses. But if you're going to throw out DeAndre Hunter in the core 4 in the last 5 minutes of a playoff game, I would like to see them get a little more run in the regular season to figure out how they gel best together. And when DeAndre has the ball in this spot, where Jared and Evan have to be to maximize spacing, but also giving DeAndre the necessary help he needs and options and outlets he needs to be both a scorer and a facilitator. And how do you run DeAndre off some of the sets that Max Strus typically runs? Can he execute at that level? And defensively, are you still switching when you have 3 bigs on the court? And I know Hunter's a wing, but for the sake of this, he also plays the backup 4. He's kind of a big wing. So do you still switch everything? Or do you try and hold a little more integrity to your defensive matchups so you're not getting Darius or Donovan on a big in a mismatch? And even though you can help off that because you have a rim protector at the rim at all times with 3 big guys on the court, do you fight over screens? Do you hedge? Do you ice? Do you trap? What do the defensive rotations look like? And how does that change from Strus to Hunter or from Wade to Hunter or from Okoro to Hunter? You know, those are the kind of things that, unless you do it in the regular season, how are you certain they're going to work in the playoffs? It certainly can. I am not trying to advocate or tell you guys that it can't work. I'm just asking the question. Would you rather them practice it in the regular season, get some live reps at it in the regular season, or would you rather them throw it out in the playoffs for the very first time? I personally fall on the side of I would rather see them test it out in the regular season, figure out what worked and what didn't work, and then execute and making those changes to make sure it's more effective the second time around than it was the first. So in a playoff series, you already have those issues on tape that you can fix. And Kenny Atkinson has said time and time again, he has no issue putting stuff out on tape before the playoffs. Ty Lue, when he coached the Cavs, had a very different philosophy. Now, I wasn't here during those times, but my co-host of the Ultimate Cavs podcast, Jason Lloyd, the editor of The Athletic in Cleveland, was covering those teams as a beat reporter. And he used to tell me that Ty Lue didn't want to put anything on tape before the playoffs. He wanted everything that they were going to throw at you in the playoffs be the first time you saw it so you weren't ready to adjust to it. And Ty Lue won a championship. So let me make this clear. There's not a right or wrong answer. Coaches feel differently. Steve Kerr and Ty Lue, two of the best coaches in the NBA, feel very differently on how to approach this. And Kenny Atkinson worked with both of those guys, with Ty Lue and with Steve Kerr. And he falls on the side of, I'd rather test it out in the regular season than in the playoffs. So maybe he's just been waiting for late in the season to test out the core 4 plus Hunter lineup. Maybe he doesn't like it. I mean, we haven't really discussed that possibility, but maybe flat out, straight up, Kenny Atkinson doesn't love that pairing. And he doesn't think it works as well as I think it could work and others think it could work. And I've advocated time and time again that in the starting lineup, I prefer Strus against every team except Boston. But the hypothetical idea of that lineup is purely hypothetical because 50 minutes of action in real live games is not enough of a sample size for anyone. Me, Kenny, Johnny Bryant, Carter, and Justin who do the chase down pod. Any of us to make a foregone conclusion that it works and or doesn't work. So yeah, that's how I want Kenny to approach the final 10 games of the season. Put some of these lineups together that could be new playoff combinations. Test out what works and what doesn't work. How about you give guys enough rest, which they have been, by the way. I'm not being critical. I think they've done a really good job this season of making sure their guys stay healthy and ready. And I would continue that. And I'd even go on the cautious side and over-rest guys until the final 5 games, which gives them tonight. Mobley's already out. We know that. And then 4 more games to mix and match rest nights, recovery nights, load management nights, whatever you want to call them. Let guys rest up. Because I don't know a lot, but I do know this. If Cleveland's going to beat Boston in the NBA Finals or in the Eastern Conference Finals and then beat Oklahoma City in the NBA Finals and or whoever they face who comes out of the Western Conference, the Cavs need to be playing at a higher level than they currently are. Donovan's in a shooting slump. Darius shot well against the Portland Trail Blazers, but had not shot well in the previous 7 games since then. Since the All-Star break, both of those 2 guys, the 2 All-Star guards on Cleveland, their numbers post-All-Star break compared to pre-All-Star break are night and day. Efficiency has catered. And the Cavs cannot win at the highest of levels if those 2 are not playing at elite levels. They can still be competitive. They can beat the Bulls. They can beat the Pacers or the Bucks in the second round, the Pistons, whoever. But they're not beating Boston and they're not beating the top teams in the West if the 2 guards are both shooting around 30% from 3 and about 45 or lower from the floor. It's just not happening. 40% or lower from the floor. If Donovan's shooting 45% and Darius is shooting 45%, you can live with that. That's right around their season averages. But post-All-Star break, that has fallen into the low 40s, high 30s. That is unacceptable. That's not good enough to win. So when it comes to rest versus rust, they can't be rusty, but they can shake off the rust. What you can't do is get healthy once the playoffs start. You don't have that built-in rest time. Yes, there are extra days between games, but there's no 4 or 5 days off unless you sweep a team. And that's a whole different story. But I don't want to bank on that happening until you actually do it. The playoffs are a different animal. And although I think the Cavs should have no problem with their first-round opponent, I'm not looking towards a sweep or a 5-game series and banking on that being your rest period to get as close to 100% healthy as possible. Instead, I'd utilize these next 4 games to make sure Donovan, Darius, Evan, Jarrett, DeAndre, Ty, whoever, Dean, Max, all those guys are as ready to go for the playoffs as humanly possible. Because in my opinion, there is nothing left to gain in the regular season. Other than officially securing the 1 seed, there is nothing left to gain for Cleveland. They only have things to lose, and they can only lose it by getting hurt, by getting banged up, and by not being ready for the playoffs. We got a couple of chats here in the couple of comments in the chat here that I want to read before we wrap up today's show. But Tony Maselli says each of the core 4 need to sit alternating games until the final 4 games, or they all need to step up and play sharp. Boston's creeping up with 10 games left to go. Don't think they'll catch the Cavs, but they were nearly 10 games back 2 weeks ago. OKC is going for 70 wins. Maybe they'll burn themselves out in doing so. Hey, Boston is playing better without a doubt. And the Thunder are a beast in its own right. And it'd be a heck of a playoff series if that's the NBA Finals we get blessed with. But what OKC is doing should not concern the Cavs. What Boston is doing should concern the Cavs. But to overcome 5 games in the loss column with 10 games left to play is almost impossible considering the opponents Cleveland has and the caliber of players they have, even if the top guys rest. But I do agree with Tony, and we'll end it with this. If anyone, Donovan, Darius, Evan, Jarrett, DeAndre, Ty, Dean, Max, whoever, feels like something's not right, take a day off. Take the game off. Because I said it before and I'll say it again. You could play out of rust in the playoffs. And you may lose a game in the first round, whatever. But you could overcome rust. If you are not healthy when the playoffs start, it is very difficult to get healthier as the playoffs go on and on and on. So be healthy when it starts and don't worry about it later. I got to run. I got to get to Rocket Arena to check out the Cavs-Spurs game tonight. We appreciate everybody tuning into this Bleacher Report Cavaliers Weekly. You can find me on Twitter if you like what you heard, at Mike Lucas TV. You see it there on the screen. I'm part of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. We are live Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., talking all things Cavs, Browns, and Guardians. And remember, as always, go Cavs.